Good morning. Welcome to the first of a series of webinars, which are going to constitute our fourth annual Ohio Roundabouts Conference. This is Victoria Beal with the Ohio LTAP Center, and I want to welcome you to my favorite time of year because, as Hillary is going to tell you very shortly, next week is National Roundabouts Week. And I want to tell you, there on that photo on the screen, she has combined two of my favorite things, one of my favorite authors, and of course, roundabouts. So we are so pleased to have you joining us today. Even though we are doing the conference virtually, I want to mention that we would like for everybody over the next couple of weeks to still take your tour, your lunchtime tour that we've always incorporated into the conference. So it doesn't have to be at lunchtime, but I will be emailing out to everybody later today the official conference brochure. And in it is going to have a link to the database that contains all of the roundabouts within the United States. And I want to encourage you to go out and visit a roundabout during the next 2 to 3 weeks. And while you're there, take some pictures and then send them in to us via email, because next year when we're hopefully all back together, I'd like to make a slideshow of your roundabout visits during this virtual conference that we can play at the breaks. So with that, I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping items, and then I'm going to turn things over to Hillary. First off, in the GoToWebinar panel, I'd like to ask you to look for the question box. And if you could please drop me a hi or hello in that question box, just so I know that you've found it. I would appreciate that. We're going to take questions all throughout the presentation this morning in the question box, but when we get to certain designated times, we are also going to open the phone line up. So how we're going to do that is in the GoToWebinar panel, you have the ability to raise your hand. So if you would like to be unmuted to be able to ask an audio question during those specific question times, raise your hand, and when we get that far, I'll be unmuting folks and Hillary will be talking with you directly and answering your questions. The other thing I would like to mention is that we have in the handout section 3 handouts for you. So if you can't download them from there, though, for some reason, don't worry. I will send out a link to where I've posted those on our website as well. So I believe that's all I have, Hillary. Are you ready?
I sure am. Hi,
Awesome. Thank you.
everyone. Good morning. It's such a pleasure to be with you virtually here on a Friday. Bright and early for us in the western part of the US, if we have anyone else in the Pacific or in the Mountain Time Zone. So good morning, good morning. What a great agenda. So no doubt, no surprise that Ohio LTAP is able to basically take that amazing conference that you guys have held the last 4 years in Ohio and have turned it into an outstanding agenda over the next couple of weeks. So I hope you have all had an opportunity to register for each of the sessions. Hopefully you noticed that you have to individually register for all of those. And I did talk to Victoria a little bit about that. As always, she'll be able to do recordings if the recordings go well and be able to post that. So even if you have to miss one of the sessions, as always, Victoria and the LTAP staff are trying to do their best to have recordings so people can go back and if they've missed a session, they're able to catch up on what was discussed, what was presented, and then the conversation that was had. So again, great to be here with you. And in this virtual world, I hope everyone is doing well and has plans, some special plans for the weekend. I am gonna probably turn my camera on and off throughout the next hour and a half, just to take a break on some bandwidth here. But as always, I'm excited to be here. I've got several things that hopefully are very new to you. We've got some things from Federal Highways that have just been released in the last week. And I'm excited to hear the questions that you guys have for me. So I really am encouraging folks to ask questions. Victoria is going to help facilitate that. And then we will have a couple of opportunities. As she mentioned, if you raise your hand, we'll have some opportunities to actually put you on the line, because I want to hear some voices today. I don't want to just be the only one talking over the next 90 minutes. So I'm going to shut that camera off for now, and I'll start jumping into our content. All right. So if you guys remember, and if you have attended, this is where normally I'd ask some questions and you guys would raise your hands. If you've been at any of the last few roundabout conferences in Ohio, you know that I have been trying to do this "you might be a roundabout geek if" slide, just to kind of kick things off in a humorous way, and in a sense, kind of make fun of ourselves or myself in terms of some of the things related, roundabout related. So you might be a roundabout geek if, get it to work, you own a t-shirt with a roundabout on it. In fact, I own 2 t-shirts with a roundabout on it. You might be a roundabout geek if you can visualize any intersection as a roundabout. And how about you might be a roundabout geek if you smile every time you see a roundabout? That would be me. You might be a roundabout geek if you only watch the Tour de France to see the cyclists ride through the roundabouts. You might be a roundabout geek if your kids ask if they should video the roundabout as you drive through one while on vacation. And last, you might be a roundabout geek if you only look at your social media account during National Roundabouts Week, #Roundabouts Week. Well, I hope some of you can connect with a few of these statements. I think it's kind of fun just to think about the different ways that roundabouts can really enhance safety and efficiency in our roadway network, as well as actually provide opportunities for art and aesthetics as we look at roundabouts as gateways to our communities. So I hope you enjoyed listening to my might be a roundabout geek statements of 2020. All right, so some of the things that we're going to talk about today is I want to look back to 2019, since many of us were together last year at this time. We want to continue to reinforce our conversation regarding roundabouts that are saving lives. We want to talk about what's new. We want to look forward to what's coming next. And then we don't want to forget about a few things as well. And then clearly we are going to be doing Q&A throughout. We've got a couple of poll questions for you today as well. But I just, that's kind of where we're headed really in the next 90 minutes. So I want to look back, actually this is I want to look back to actually 2 years ago in 2018, Hurricane Florence in this week, September 2018, hit Wilmington, North Carolina really bad. I don't know if any of you can recall that week. It was a very hard hit hurricane in that area. Well, in 2019, the city of Wilmington, North Carolina was awarded the state and national, they were a state and national award winner for building a better mousetrap. And there's a whole article on this that was put out by the North Carolina LTAP, Local Technical Assistance Program. So for those of you that weren't familiar or didn't remember the story, you had law enforcement. So clearly the power was out, the hurricane hit, the power was out. They've got these large signalized intersections where they were out. They were blank. And so a law enforcement officer, you can see there in the middle, he parked his patrol car, he called someone else, said, bring me some cones. We're gonna create a roundabout, because really they needed the resources elsewhere. They couldn't have 3 or 4 officers standing at signalized intersections helping direct traffic, because they had other emergencies going on as a result of the hurricane. So I have highlighted there on the bottom, with these roundabouts in place for 3 to 4 days, scores of police officers were available to answer calls for service instead of managing traffic control. No traffic crashes occurred at these locations while the roundabouts were in place. So again, it was a way that they could control traffic more easily and officers could be used elsewhere. The other thing that's included in one of the articles that was written about this was the fact that they have included this installation of a temporary roundabout in their emergency management protocol now. So moving forward, if they ever have a situation where the power is out, they immediately can go to, they have extra cones, so they are able to basically quickly convert a signalized intersection or really any intersection to a roundabout to free up resources. So I wanted to acknowledge that because, one, it happened 2 years ago. This week that hurricane had hit, and also the fact that they were a 2019 award winner. And I wanted to make sure I acknowledge that. I'm sure some of you may know it, but also this is a tribute to the amazing LTAP program that is across the nation, and what they offer and how they highlight and they share noteworthy practices with all of their partners across the state. So thanks to the North Carolina LTAP for submitting them, and thank you to Wilmington, North Carolina for their staff and the police officers for being super creative and doing a conversion on the fly and providing safe operations during power outages in a hurricane. So the next thing I want to acknowledge from 2019. So after we were all together in Newark, Ohio, and thanks again for the folks that hosted us there last year. I don't know if you all saw it, but at the end of that week, there was the loop video. So Ohio DOT, hopefully most of you know, I think it's every week they do the loop that kind of highlights various things that are going on with the DOT. And I want to play that video for you. And just in case, for those of you who didn't see it, I know many of you attended that conference last year, but it was a really nice, the Loop staff do a really, really nice job. So Victoria, I'm going to attempt to launch that video myself, and hopefully.
I'm sure you'll do great with it.
All right. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. Again, I don't know how many of you saw that last year after we were together, but that is a really nice way that we can get our message out. And you actually saw a clip of some of the marketing folks, the public affairs folks that were at the panel there in that video. That really, we need to tell our story. And I think that it's not just for roundabouts, it's what we do in safety and the good stories from traffic operations. And ODOT clearly does a good job. They've got the loop, that is something that's regular that they have, but even local agencies, if you've got a public information officer, or you have a way to tell the story about your projects, I encourage you to continue to do so. I know in speaking with some of the Franklin County staff before, they've got a way that they're able to get out some messaging. I know the county I live in, they actually have their own little TV blurb that they have both online and then with the local TV station that they're able to get some messaging out. So again, wanted to share that with you. It was from 2019, right after many of us were together there in Newark. And then last but not least, I'm going to let you guys know that today, the Loop 2020, there actually is a whole discussion about construction, but I had to note that, and thanks to Ron Garszewski from the Ohio Division Office for making sure that I knew this, they actually talk about a bridge project that has roundabouts on, I believe, either end of the bridge project. So check out the Loop today, and you will see a roundabout project mentioned there as well. So as you all remember, I believe last year we were in the midst of National Roundabouts Week when I was there in Ohio. And this is just some of the information that was captured from the social media. So our second year with National Roundabouts Week, which was last year, was a big success. It got a lot of hits in social media. So for those of you that are gearing up, we encourage you to look for ways to engage and participate, share your latest and greatest projects and your practices, because there was a very large presence in social media last year with the National Roundabouts Week. So this is an article, there's a link on the bottom there. Federal Highways has done an article the last 2 years in our safety compass, just to kind of summarize and highlight. And of course, we can't forget Professor Roundabout, our friend Letty Shamp from Hilliard, Ohio, that got a lot of press last year as well with her debuting Professor Roundabout. So let's switch gears a little bit in terms of looking at the data, just the safety data related to intersections in Ohio. So this data is from 2015 to 2019, so a 5-year capture, and kudos to Ohio DOT and the fact that they've got this dashboard on their website where you can actually look in, you can look by the Strategic Highway Safety Plan emphasis area, and you can look by county, MPO region, city, village, town, Ohio DOT district, and you can drill down to the data to see how many fatalities have occurred. So you can see there I've highlighted the intersection fatalities. So in 2019, there was about 231 fatalities that occurred on intersections. So again, that is significant in terms of the number of crashes that occur. You can see on the left the total number of crashes that have occurred in Ohio for all the years between 2015 and 2019. So it's about 20% of the fatalities that occur are at intersections. So our challenge is big, and we have a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of intersections on the ground, both at the local level, the regional level, and the state level, where we've got opportunities when we've got projects that are being considered to look for proven safety countermeasures. Roundabouts are one of those. There are other proven safety countermeasures and other intersection types that we know can save lives. So again, the challenge is large. We've got a long way to go, but with each project, and we have an opportunity. And I think that that's what keeps a lot of us going every day, is knowing that we've got opportunities to make a big difference in people's lives with our transportation projects. So again, this is that snapshot from 2015 to 2019. And we need to look at, really what that means. It means that there's one intersection death every 33 hours in Ohio, approximately, based on the data over the last few years. And there's about 9 serious injuries at intersections every day in Ohio. So that is very significant. And again, think about that. Our goal as transportation professionals is to get people home safely. And again, there's multiple ways we can do that. But intersections being a planned conflict point are a big opportunity for us to apply innovative and proven safety countermeasures to make our roads safer for not only the traveling public, but also for your communities and for your family as well. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to see if Victoria, if there's any questions in the chat pod that have come in, or in the Q&A pod.
There are no questions in the question box, and I haven't seen anybody raise their hand yet wanting to ask an audio question. So maybe they just need to get a little bit more caffeine in their systems.
Absolutely. I've got my big cup of coffee in front of me right here. Okay, thanks, Victoria. All right, so let's keep moving. Roundabouts are saving lives. And I think that that's something that we need to remember. There was actually just a post late last night, our friend Jean Russell, former chair of the TRB National Roundabouts Committee and former professor emeritus at K-State University, posted a link, actually I believe it was from Pennsylvania, a nice article about how roundabouts are saving lives in Pennsylvania. So let me share a couple of other One is a strategy, and then one is an example of how states are reporting out how they're saving lives with roundabouts. So not sure how many of you have heard of the safe system approach. I have mentioned it previously. I believe I mentioned it in June, and hopefully I mentioned it last year when we all met together. But Federal Highways is just released our brochure on safe system approach. It is something that's being discussed through ITE, the International Transportation Engineers group, both nationally here in the US, and then internationally it has been talked about for several years. Our friends in Europe and in New Zealand. But really, the goal is a safe system. So 0 is our goal, really, right? Towards 0 deaths, vision 0. But a safe system is how we're going to get there. And so there's quite a few elements of the safe system approach. But really, it's acknowledging the fact that deaths and serious injuries is unacceptable on our roadways. We also have to acknowledge that humans make mistakes. And we're also very vulnerable in terms of if we get into a crash. We have to acknowledge that responsibility is shared and that safety is proactive, and that ultimately redundancy in our system is crucial to our success. And so I share this with you. It is actually one of the files that you can download in the download file there on the screen. But it's really important, and I talked to you about this because roundabouts have a role in this. Roundabouts oftentimes are actually used as an example when you talk about the safe system approach across the world. Because what do roundabouts do? It's the fundamentals of roundabouts. Well, roundabouts, we reduce the speeds at the intersection, 15 and 25 miles per hour. So all traffic, no matter what the posted speed is on the approaches, we're traveling between 15 and 25 miles an hour, hopefully through that roundabout intersection. What else have we done? We've reduced the conflict points. We've reduced the conflict points, and with that, we've actually reduced the probability of a crash. We've also, if there is a crash, we've changed the crash type with the roundabout because of the geometry, because of the basically the vehicles yielding on the approaches to the circulating traffic, and we have really changed the dynamics of the intersection such that it is a game changer when it comes to safety. And all of these really play into that safe system approach in terms of we do ask the drivers to change their behavior as they're driving through that intersection through speed and through actually, what they're looking for conflicts. So controlling speed is a big one right there. You can see that piece is important, and we're reducing the system kinetic energy when we bring all traffic to that 15 to 25 miles per hour. We also, again, in terms of humans making mistakes, I know I make mistakes when I am driving. It's that when people do make mistakes, it's not fatal or it's not a serious injury. It's that we can lessen the severity of those crashes. And so roundabouts, so as you're gonna probably, my guess is you'll hear more and more about the safe system approach. And this is something that we can talk about and talk about these elements of safe system when we are looking at our roundabout projects. So I encourage you to learn more about the safe system approach and think about how roundabouts and other projects, rumble strips comes to mind as another piece of our system in terms of a countermeasure that can really assist in terms of preventing that severe or fatal crash on the open roadway. So I introduced this to you in a little bit more detail than we've had in the past, and excited to move forward with this particular concept as we look at our projects in the future and we look at our programs in the future. So let me talk to you a little bit about Connecticut. So Connecticut, yes, it's a small state. Had an opportunity to be with some folks from Connecticut over the last couple of weeks with a roundabout class. And they continue to talk about how each of their roundabouts has prevented serious and fatal crashes and saved lives. And this is actually an update to what they've shared in the past through their an article or a newsletter that the Connecticut LTAP has put out. And they speak to their before and after crashes in terms of what the crashes were before, the types of crashes were before, both fatal, injury, and total crashes, and then how the roundabouts have made a big impact on the safety at these particular intersections. So in Connecticut, they have an 80% reduction in severe crashes and a 50% reduction in overall crashes. And in some cases, in a couple of those roundabouts, they've actually basically gone to 0 fatal and injury crashes after the roundabouts have been installed. And that's really what we know roundabouts are capable of doing with a well-designed project. And I just want to, again, they've updated their data recently here, and I think it's really good, and it's a lesson for all of us to be speaking to how our projects have worked. And I know not every project has a significant maybe reduction in total crashes, but still we have to talk about the benefits, all those other benefits, the reduced conflict points, the reduced speeds, and how that plays into our safe system, our roadway network that we have. I know there's other, I mentioned the article that came out, or the post that came out from Gene Russell on the Roundabouts listserv late last night that talked about Pennsylvania. I'm just curious if there's any other folks that want to, at this time, maybe share a story related to roundabouts saving lives. There's a question in the chat pod, Victoria.
I don't see any raised hands, but we do have some comments in the question box.
Great.
It says, in the loop video, someone commented that roundabouts are safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. Are there any before-after studies of pedestrian counts which verify that statement, i.e. traffic signal updated to roundabout? And that question came from Patricia Kovacs.
Hi, Patricia, how are you? So Patricia and everyone, what we have is we rely, there has been since NCHRP, so National Cooperative Highway Research Program 572, that's getting older as every day goes by. Clearly that there was some observational studies and some data that was collected with pedestrians, specifically to pedestrians and roundabouts. There has, to my knowledge, not been another comprehensive research project looking across the US on pedestrian data. But what we do track, I think as a profession, or I through ITE, through TRB, and really through the K-State listserv, is if there is a crash with a pedestrian at a roundabout, we hear about it. We rely on word of mouth. I can say that without having any research projects in play. There was, again, actually you have to go back to the late 1990s and really the early 2000s before we actually had, I guess I'm going to call it a case study sample, and then NCHRP 572, where we had a more comprehensive data set when we were originally developing the NCHRP 672, actually, when we were actually originally, yes, developing the NCHRP 672 roundabouts guide here in the US. So Patricia, to our knowledge, I would say it doesn't mean that it's 100%, but to our knowledge, there's been one fatality at a roundabout, a pedestrian fatality at a roundabout in the US. It did occur in Minnesota. And we do try to track that, but there has not been a research report or statement that has come out that is comprehensive at this point in time. So we're relying on the local agencies and the state DOTs with their various studies that they have been doing to track that as best as we can. So that is something that I guess at this point in time, there's not a research report specifically in the last 10 years that I can point to. But again, we try to educate ourselves and share knowledge with each other, both in the state of Ohio and across the country. And Patricia, I know you've been a great advocate for pedestrian safety and accessibility, and we thank you for that. Victoria, are there any other questions?
Yep, I've got a couple more here.
Sure.
There's a question that I think I'd like to know the answer to too, because my son likes to do this to me when he's driving us through a roundabout. Is it legal to circle a roundabout more than 3 times?
I don't think it's illegal unless it's in your traffic the traffic law. But I would also caution, if you're in a single lane roundabout, that might be okay. But if you're in a multi-lane roundabout, you need to pay attention to what lane you're in and which the lane use that is going on, because you could potentially start violating if you're going around 3 times. You would be changing lanes within the roundabout, and that's something that we discourage everyone. We do not want people changing lanes in the roundabout. So again, if it's a single lane roundabout, it's probably not a problem. I'm not aware of any states that have laws that say that it's against the law to go 3 times around a roundabout. But again, if you're in a multi-lane roundabout, your chances are you are violating the traffic law by changing lanes if you're not in the correct lane when that happens. So hopefully that helps with that question.
It does. My son hasn't done it in anything but a single lane roundabout, so I think we're okay right now.
Well, I must admit, when I'm checking my speeds, I will go around, probably not more than twice, but I will for the lefts or a U-turn. I sometimes will go around as I'm checking speeds in roundabouts to see if it is in that 15 to 25 miles an hour that we're trying to achieve. So sometimes there's a scientific reason that we want to do that in addition to maybe just having a good time.
All right, we've got a question about, is a 3rd edition of the roundabout guide being worked on?
So I'm going to touch on that in a minute. I'm going to save that question. So I will definitely cover that.
Okay, and then we had another comment from Patricia, and we had some links sent in by Dirk Gross, which I think will assist with Patricia's question. But she said that her concern is roundabouts discourage pedestrians from using the intersections. But in response to that discussion earlier, Dirk Gross, who is one of our safety engineers and has a lot of experience in this area, sent in a link about NCHRP 3-78. And he said it's also NCHRP report 834. So I will share those comments out with everybody, but that's all we've got in the question box right now.
Okay, great. And yeah, just to follow up on that. So that was the original, the 3-78, and I think there was an A and a B for NCHRP. There was actually 2 reports. There was the NCHRP 674, which was looking at accessibility of multi-lane roundabouts and channelized turn lanes. And then the subsequent, which is actually the guidance, is that 834 document. And there is web documents that go along with those as well that have additional information. And I know, Patricia, I'm not mistaken, you are familiar with those. And yes, but those do provide good information on accessibility and safety. And then Federal Highways has what we have called TOPR, TOPR 34. So if you, in 2015, we published the research on rectangular rapid flashing beacons and accessibility at multi-lane roundabouts. And again, Patricia, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with those, but for those who aren't, those are the documents, the national documents that we have out there that are looking at really safety and accessibility with multi-lane roundabouts. But thank you, Dirk, for providing that. Appreciate it. All right, anything else, Victoria?
Actually, there was a comment from Letty, and
okay.
She stated that raised crosswalks are showing some promise at lowering vehicle speeds, which tends to increase yielding behavior. And then we have another one, and this one's from Kyle Warner. It says, other than being the federal guideline, is there any actual data or research to support the use of longer splitter islands, 100 feet to 200 feet in length, at high-speed rural intersections to reduce vehicle speeds on the approaches? It seems that there are many roundabouts with much shorter splitter island lengths that are performing extremely well.
So I'm gonna first go to Letty. Yes, you guys pay attention to what's going on in Hilliard, Ohio with their raised crosswalks. And if you haven't had an opportunity to go drive them, I really encourage you to check those out. That's definitely a project that I know Federal Highways is watching and many other agencies are watching. Not that they're the only roundabouts that have raised crosswalks, but clearly hopefully if you're in Ohio, that is in your backyard. And I'm hopefully Letty, you're able to continue to share your updates and your story. I know I've gotten it through some project work that you're involved with. But please do pay attention. And again, I encourage folks to go to Hilliard to look at those locations and watch the traffic as it is and that there's a lot of opportunities there for some good observations with pedestrians, bicyclists, and clearly the yielding that is going on. So the question with splitter island lengths. So nice question. So there is guidance in NCHRP 672. There's actually guidance in your ODOT design manual related to splitter island lengths. And you are correct with the last part of your sentence that said that shorter splitter, and when I say shorter, I'm going to say between 150 and let's say 250 feet on high-speed approaches. So I'm going to say over 40 to 45 miles per hour. That the safety results are outstanding. They're excellent. They're 90% reduction in fatal and injury crashes. And if you look across, if you look from the 1990s when we first had rural roundabouts, Maryland comes to mind, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Washington State, Oregon, that had some of the first, Kansas had some of the first roundabouts on high-speed approaches. And those splitter island lengths vary, again, I'd say probably between 100 feet and probably 250 feet in length, maybe 300 feet at the most. And they all have an amazing safety record. And that was our original research that was out there on roundabouts on high-speed roadways and looking at the reduction in fatal and injury crashes, as well as total crashes in those rural environments. As time has gone on, I would say that we do see some designs that have longer splitter island lengths for various reasons, I would say. But in my, based on my research and my continuing tracking of roundabouts in rural environments, they still have a great track record when it comes to safety. So it sometimes becomes an agency preference. Sometimes it's a context preference in terms of perhaps you're doing some access control with the longer splitter islands. But rest assured that if you look at some of our original rural roundabouts on high-speed approaches, and I mentioned the states, their track records remain for preventing those fatal and injury crashes on rural roadways. So be happy to talk more offline about that specific topic. But you do see a lot more variability in splitter island lengths now today than you did 10 years ago. They used to all kind of be less, I would say, than 300 feet in the rural environments. And now you see more that are longer. Okay. Okay, so Victoria, any other questions pop in while we were chatting?
Not right now.
Okay, great. I'm gonna keep moving then. All right. So what's new? Let's talk about what has been new since maybe some of you I know I spoke in June on LTAP's Ohio LTAP's amazing webinar series, but perhaps you haven't had an opportunity to hear about some of the new things that are going on with roundabouts in the U.S. So I've got a couple of poll questions. Actually, there's two, Victoria. If you could pull those up, that would be helpful.
Okay, I just launched the first one, and I could only put in 5 responses, so I have to say that I did chop off the last 2 responses. I'm sorry.
No problem.
But we have options of mini, single lane, hybrid 1x2, or 2x1, multi-lane 2x2, 3x2, or turbo. And you can choose multiple.
So this is just getting a sense for you all on the phone today, what kind of projects you've been working on. And when I say design, it could mean maybe you're the traffic analyst. It could be you're the geometrician.
Folks are voting quickly. We're almost up to 60%.
Great.
So
thank you everyone for participating in the poll. We got another one after this too.
Yeah, I usually like to try to get up around 80%, but I understand that there might be some folks on who haven't designed. So when you think we're ready to go, we can go ahead and move to the next question.
That's fine. Let's go ahead and look at the next question.
All right, well, let me close this one out and I'm gonna share the results. And we have 92% who said they've designed single lane. 53 chose the 1x2 or 2x1. And then 31% chose mini, 24% chose the multi-lane, and 4% chose the turbo. So I'll hide that.
Right.
All right, and I'm going to put the next one up. And this is going to look almost the same, but here we're asking about if you've reviewed them.
Correct. So I'll actually, I don't know if it changes, I do that. So we know some of you are not maybe necessarily the designers, but you have a role in the success of roundabout projects, and that would be as a reviewer. So I know some of you, that is more your role perhaps, and some of you might do both.
Again, you guys are spot on voting quickly, and we appreciate that. We are up over 50%, so maybe once we get up closer to the percent for the last one, I'll share the results. All right, we're up over 60%, so I'm going to close this poll out and share the results. And we have 94% who've reviewed a single lane, 53% reviewed the hybrid 1x2, 33% have reviewed a multi-lane, 28% have reviewed a mini, and 6% have reviewed a turbo. So I'll go ahead and hide that now, and it's back to you, Hillary.
All right, great. Well, it's always just good to know from especially a large audience like this, in particular in Ohio, that you guys have been very progressive with your, not only your roundabout projects, but also your roundabout education, just to get a sense for what projects you all are working on, and then what roles you guys are having. And again, depending on what your position is and what your role is within your agency, you might not be that designer, but it's just as important as a reviewer, if not more, to really know as much as the designer and the traffic analyst, because it's your review that can make that project better. And so it's exciting. I'm excited to see that the numbers are creeping up on the mini roundabouts and the turbo roundabouts. Clearly in Newark, we saw those amazing projects last year. And then, again, that some people are still pursuing those multi-lane, those 2x2s, 3x2s. I know Letty doesn't like to hear the word 2x2, or probably 3x2, but I know you guys have some of those in the Ohio. So, and then, again, as we move forward with our projects and our designs, we've got so many lessons learned. And again, I learn on a regular basis from you all in Ohio, as we advance our practice when it comes to roundabouts. So glad to see so many people are engaged with roundabout projects at this level. All right, so here's to the question about the roundabout guide. So NCHRP 672 is clearly our current guide that's out there. It was published in 2010, and there's been dozens of research reports and projects and case studies that have come out since 2010, clearly. But there is a project underway. It is NCHRP 03-130, and that project is underway, and the projected date for completion is 2022. So that is a couple of years away. I know it's hard to wait, but rest assured, you guys, the things that are going to be going in there, many of them are out there. The research documents, I've shared many of them with you. It's a combination of pooled fund projects, it's as well as NCHRP projects, federal highways projects, and then the case studies and the statewide projects that have occurred across the country. So I encourage you to, if you don't have that list, I actually don't think I included it in this slide deck. Reach out to me, let me know, and I can get you that kind of list that I have running of the major projects since 2010. And then know that the project, the folks that are working on this project, there's a couple of research projects that are a part of the update to the guide. One looking at large trucks, one looking at bicycles, And then there's multiple, I guess, smaller, I would call them almost like synthesis, where we're really trying to get the latest and greatest information available to you. There's some work on economics, there's some work on lighting, but we really hope with the next guide, of course, we're not trying to come up with a roundabout guide that's as thick as the green book, but I tell you what, folks, we're really trying to supplement what is in there currently and give you a guide that is very helpful. Clearly, the foundation of your Ohio DOT design guide is based off of NCHRP 672. We've got some great information in there, and we do hope, clearly, NCHRP, I would say always keep your ears to the ground. Typically, there's always an update that will come at the annual meeting that's usually put on by the PI, which is Brian Ray from Kittleson and Associates. But if you have any questions, you can always reach out to the NCHRP staff folks to get an update as that project continues to move forward. But I'm just like you, I can't wait till it's out there. But in the meantime, if you're looking for something specific on a topic, let me know, let Victoria know, let ODOT know, or many of you are clearly a wealth of knowledge of some of the research that's already out there. Something that is new since we saw you last, or I saw you last, is the FHWA Turbo Roundabout Informational Primer. So this document, again, with some help, some folks from Ohio, Arcadis, thank you. We were able to Federal Highways is able to fund a research project that really brings the international knowledge to the US on turbo roundabouts. So this document really does try to capture the information internationally from the Netherlands, from Germany, and other countries that have had experience and success with turbo roundabouts. It does speak to some of the differences that we see implementing turbos here in the United States. I can also report that let's see, the first turbo roundabout, officially a turbo roundabout, is being constructed in Jacksonville, Florida. That is scheduled to be completed in 2021. There are a couple other projects out there that are on the heels of that project in Florida. One in particular in California. That is a pretty complex project that they are pursuing out there. So I know there's been projects that have been looked at in Ohio. I know our colleagues and friends in Georgia have also looked at pursuing turbo roundabouts in several other states. Colorado comes to mind, I think North Carolina. So it's a matter of time before I think we see more turbos. I encourage you to check this one out. The link is on the bottom. Again, find your search engine. You can Google turbo roundabout FHWA safety. You will find this document. So I hope you, again, take the information. I know that some Arcadis and some other folks in Ohio have presented on this before, but again, you might enjoy a nice weekend read for you with the turbo roundabouts. I'm going to put this up here just because a lot of times I hear folks talk about the capacity. Oh, the turbo has so much more capacity. Well, what we have now is kind of this translation of what the turbo is from a capacity standpoint compared to maybe our more traditional two-lane roundabouts. I would also say if you are pursuing one, again, remember that our US model does not have turbos in it. And the UK and the Australian models that are out there in terms of capacity analysis, I would just, a word of caution that we don't have a direct transfer from the Dutch models to the US yet. And so it's really important that you are paying attention to the details, using engineering judgment for comparison, and really being with a critical eye, considering how you might be using the other tools that are out there. So I'm excited that there are several projects, again, that are looking for turbos. Again, turbos, for those of you who don't know, clearly you could see from the picture that the geometrics are a little bit different, but the raised channelization on the approaches and in the circulatory roadway really have potentially some great benefits for reducing the PDO crashes we think, here in the US. And that's really ultimately how it started in the Netherlands. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And again, I just encourage you to continue to be creative and thoughtful in your designs. I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to briefly touch on your Ohio Design Manual, which there was an update. You guys clearly have your updates typically in January and July. There are some, again, highlighted in red text, but I'm actually just going to highlight something that wasn't new this time, but the 403.2, Designing Roundabouts for Future Considerations. This is a really important piece of your design guidance, is so we're not over designing our projects. And so there's some good guidance in there that I encourage you to look at if you haven't looked at recently. That's always a good reminder to refresh your mind as it relates to your ODOT design guidance. Now, this actually takes a look at, since the conference last year in 2019, some of the updates that have occurred in the guidance. Again, the discussion of trade-offs for all users, the future considerations and phased implementation, the range of values for your diameters. It does talk about that splitter island length piece that we had the question on earlier, talking about the importance of that truck apron, and I'm going to cover that a little bit more. A nice checklist, folks. I really like this. I've been sharing this with other states. Now there's also an introduction for the use of Transmodeler, and then some tire tracking guidance that's new with this last update in July. So don't hesitate to pick that up, check it out, see what's new. And again, I've been readily sharing Ohio's guidance with other states. You guys have gotten a lot of great information incorporated into your design manual. And so kudos to the design staff that are continuing to update and track the updates there for roundabouts. So let's talk a little bit again, what's new. So let's just talk about some more other complex projects that are out there. Some of you might be familiar with these projects, others perhaps not. In the upper left, that particular project actually is off of I-35 in Austin, Texas. Notice they actually have a raised crosswalk, and that's part of the reason why I share this particular project with you. They expect during peak periods they'll have 1,000 vehicles turning left. So this is coming across a structure and then going left onto the on-ramp onto southbound I-35. So the geometry here was a big challenge for them in terms of the constraints that they had with the interstate, with actually a large transmission line for a power line and other property that they had there. They did want to make sure that they had crosswalks for both pedestrians and bicyclists that could get through there safely. So again, they were dealt some challenges from a space perspective, which affected geometry. They do have the raised crosswalks. They did also, I will let you guys know, they did do a retrofit very shortly after they opened this one. Again, it had to do with how the folks were driving the roundabout, and that difference between opening day and future traffic volumes and what was going to be happening, and that big difference in terms of the number of lanes that would be needed today versus 20 years from now during the peak period. So again, kudos to TxDOT for doing the retrofit pretty quickly, and also for getting those raised crosswalks in there at that location. If I go to the right side, you can see there's actually a depressed interstate, and then you've got what is called a roundabout lid. That is from our friends in Washington State. You can see there that they provided actually some connectivity. They actually have a little bit of a park system and a trail system that is going across that lid. It really connects one side of that interstate to the other. So again, using the creativity, using that structure to add a few more elements that really can enhance what that interchange looks like, right? It's not our interchange of days gone by that is all concrete and loud and ugly and big. That lid is really nice. Look at all that green space they were able to get, again, with tying into challenging. They've got curvature on main line. You've got multiple side streets, and then you're maintaining that connectivity across the interstate there. So a nice project there in Washington. I'll go to the bottom left. This particular project is Missouri DOT built the world's first divergeabout to improve safety and traffic flow at Interstate 49 and 155th Street in Kansas City. So a nice picture from nighttime with it all lit up. Again, folks, that is a diverging diamond interchange with a roundabout. There's actually a couple of those in Missouri. There's one in a more rural environment as well, in addition to the one in Kansas City. If Federal Highways did a write-up on that, Missouri DOT actually has a write-up on that particular project. They do call it the divergeabout, but again, never say never. There's a real nice innovative interchange there with that particular project. Bottom right, this happens to be from Wisconsin in the Green Bay area. This is with some flyovers. You can see the structures with the ramps that are connecting basically interstate highway north-south, and then a major US route east-west off to the left-hand side there. In fact, they've got 3 roundabouts. One of the roundabouts, the one all the way upward to the left, it's hard to see because there is a bridge right over it. And in fact, that pier is right actually in the center island of that roundabout. So a challenging project, but you can see there how they integrated the frontage road, the side roads, the ramps, the flyovers, in a complex, very tightly constrained area with a interstate and a major US highway off there to the west. So just wanted to show you, we continue to challenge ourselves and get creative. Again, it is a combination of the art and the science here to make sure that we've got projects that fit our context, but as well as providing safety and innovation and efficiency at our intersections and interchanges. I am not going to speak too much to this project. This is a pooled fund project. I believe that it is on the agenda. If I'm not mistaken, it is on the agenda. Yes, it is on the agenda for Tuesday, September 29th at noon Eastern time. So stay tuned for that. If you want to know more about this project, Hilliard, Ohio, you can see there is a list of one of the partners. Washington State, actually they're on there too, and you can see the DOTs that are involved as well. This is overseen by Federal Highways, our Wei Zhang, our R&D intersection specialist. So I encourage you to learn more about that project on Tuesday. I want to share, I know you guys, you've got some large circles in Ohio in some of your areas, particularly I would say more in maybe the Cleveland area, but I think there's a couple other larger circles in the state of Ohio. Just wanted to share this. I thought this was a nice retrofit that Connecticut DOT did. So maybe some of you also, consultants on the call today, might be working in the Northeast, where they took clearly on the left there, an old circle that had high speeds, did not have good deflection. They had a lot of challenges there with crashes at that location, and still dealt with challenging geometry with it being so very skewed. But they were able to basically create a nice retrofit with modern roundabout features. They were still able to have the trucks track, make those tight rights with their outside truck aprons. But just wanted to share a nice retrofit example from our friends at Connecticut DOT. I want to hit the large vehicles, and I know I mentioned that this had been modified or updated. I think it was in the January of the ODOT manual. But don't forget about all the different vehicles that are traveling on the roadways. The curbs are so important, and having a specific curb detail for roundabouts or multiple curb details, depending if it's the outside or the inside, can be so important when we think about whether it's a bus or it's a large load, a long load, a low clearance load, someone hauling horses, someone hauling liquid, like this example here from South Carolina. Don't underestimate the importance of some of those little details. So it's not just checking your design vehicle, it's making sure that you've got all the other features. And so I introduced this here to share a couple of other examples. Again, here I'm just, know who your users are and make sure that you can get creative with outside blisters. You can get creative with doing some checks, looking at that vertical component and doing those checks in design. here in Green Bay in the upper right, they actually put a swept path through the center island to get this large vehicle that had to get up to where it was going to be loading and unloading its product. So get creative with your projects and be very mindful of all those little details. That vertical profile can be so critical when you're talking about those low clearance vehicles. There's not a standard really for low clearance vehicles, so it's important to take that into account. I shared this with you also. This is truck aprons inside and out. There's an example on the left there that actually has, it's stamped concrete there. That is the inside truck apron, that is the truck apron itself. But notice how they have the reinforcing earth, and they have, they anticipated some larger loads that would be coming through that particular roundabout. But they, again, were trying to deter the average car and really the average truck from using that extra space in the truck apron. And so they did it in different ways. They got creative with the reinforced earth, and then they actually have some pavers that allow the grass is allowed to grow through it. And that is stable enough to get those large loads through there, but it does not, it's not basically a 20-foot wide truck apron at that particular location. So real nice example. You can actually see opposite of that, again, I'm looking on the left on the inside, opposite of that, how they have a nice large actually outside truck apron on the outside there. Again, very little reveal between the circulatory roadway and the outside truck apron. The example on the left is also meant to be more of a blister or a truck apron, but it is actually flush with the asphalt. So again, looking on the right-hand side, this is also basically a patterned material here on the outside truck apron, but it is flush. But notice they use the contrast to keep cars and your average vehicle on the asphalt, but allowed for the larger vehicles to track over that space. So they felt like it had less risk than introducing an outside, basically curb and gutter, to transition to the outside truck apron in a little bit different environment than what you saw on the previous picture, which was more of a rural environment. So getting creative on how we do our features so we can make sure that the large vehicles can get through there, but also we're keeping our speeds down to that 15 to 25 miles per hour. Got one more example here, this one in particular. So I'm trying to, Victoria, is there a pointer? I feel like there is.
I believe there is. Look on the little bump out box on the GoToWebinar panel and see if you can. We can see your mouse too.
Okay, good. All right, so this is what I want to show you here is this particular project here. You can see that there's this red colored concrete on the outside, really an outside more or less truck apron. And then they actually also have the separator between the actually exclusive left and the through lane here. And what they did though, that's all flush. Again, if you look at the upper left, you can see that that is flush. They changed the color, but they kept it flush, but they provided contrast and provided room. Here again, also, they again were trying to discourage your average passenger car from using that space by using that color contrast, but keeping it flush. And so again, I think just getting creative on how we are communicating with our drivers, whether it be a truck driver or a passenger vehicle, and making sure that we are being cognizant of all the different variations of vehicles that we have out there. So I know in Connecticut, they've actually made this more of a practice in terms of not having the outside curb and gutter for the blisters, and really going with the different style of material, as well as the different color, to make sure that their large vehicles can navigate through their challenging intersections. All right, so I'm gonna stop using that because
we actually have a raised hand if you want me to unmute the person.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to reward good behavior here, so I'm going to unmute Joseph, and then he'll have to unmute himself on his end. All right, Joseph, you just need to unmute yourself. I've unmuted you on my end. On the GoToWebinar panel, there should be a like a mute, or excuse me, a microphone button if you want to unmute yourself. Oh, he took his hand down. Maybe he didn't mean to raise his hand.
Okay,
All
no
right. I got so
problem.
excited there. Sorry.
That's okay. Are there any other questions in the chat pod,
There
Victoria?
are. There are a number of
Okay,
them.
let's
Joseph
get
did
some of
mention
those
that he did not mean to raise his hand in the chat pod. So
down. No worries.
he did say, though, he was very excited that you were showing Connecticut roundabouts.
Oh, good.
Okay. All right. So the first question is, I took the high-speed approach splitter island question to ask the performance of shorter lengths. Has there been any study of lengths shorter than 150 feet?
Not specifically looking at splitter island lengths, but we do have safety projects or safety before and after studies out there, research out there that you can, I mean, you could just from visually, you could measure the splitter island lengths and then you would have the safety data that would go along with it. So I know that's kind of a roundabout way of doing that, but that is one way. We've got a lot of data now, before and after data on roundabouts, both nationally that has been documented, as well as some individual states that have done some of that documentation. So there are ways that we can do that. Again, happy to follow up with you if there's I can point to specific projects and examples out there that we do have data for, either from national data sets or, again, there's some individual states that do have their own data and they do update their data on a regular basis. So again, you kind of have to back into it. To my knowledge, we don't have a whole lot out there right now that's just specific to that topic, but something I'm very near and dear to my heart. So please follow up on that.
Yeah, in the after we complete process, I will be providing Hillary a downloaded spreadsheet of all the questions that came in, and it'll have your email addresses attached so she can follow up with you, Jay. All right, I see Steve has raised his hand, and hopefully he meant to do it. So there we go. He's unmuted himself. Yay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, good morning, Victoria, and good morning, Hillary. Just a quick question on the splitter islands and the edges of pavement that are set flush and just delineated with some different kind of surface. Do you see those being an issue in the north where with snow cover and things that you might not be able to detect those when you have snowfall?
Right, and so again, speaking to Scott Bushy from Connecticut DOT, that was one of the things. Well, first of all, there's making sure that whatever you put on the ground that is, if you've got snow, you can plow it, right? So they did work with their maintenance folks to make sure whatever they were putting out there with truck aprons, with the patterning and all of that, that they could plow it. And they actually did feel that the flush, so on the right there, that actually was easier for their operators to plow. And yes, there is a sense that things can get covered up in that time that you've got the snowfall before it can be cleared. But again, that's kind of the trade-off. They felt by working with their maintenance that this solution was better overall for maintenance. And again, it depends on your snowfall. So I would say in Colorado, where we have lots of snow on a regular basis, most of our truck aprons are not flush, but this is working. This seems to be really working for Connecticut. And they've done a lot of thought. They've had both raised, you can actually see on the left, this does have more of a curve. They actually do granite curve on a lot of their roundabouts. And they feel that going with what's here on the right has actually been better for them from a maintenance perspective. But those are all details you have to think about. And sometimes, you got to get it on the ground and see how it's working. And then they fully have said that if they need to change course, that they would and could. And they didn't go there first with the flush, with the basically the contrast. They got to that based on some of their lessons learned, as well as working with maintenance. Does that help,
Great,
Steve?
thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the question.
Thanks, Steve. If you're finished with your questions, make sure to lower your hand or I might call on you again. All right. Let's see. Well, next, there was a comment too on that I shared out with everybody that came from Joe about the the question had been asked. Next question in the question box. Don't turbo roundabouts create the same issues as a regular intersection since one crosses a lane?
Since one crosses a lane. I'm not sure that I'm following the question.
Well, and Mo can raise his hand if he'd like to just have a
Okay.
conversation about it. So I'll go on to the next question.
Okay, thank you.
The Connecticut location has red paved areas seemingly to accommodate larger vehicle turns. However, there's no guidance for pedestrian, though they are likely low in number. That's more of a comment.
Okay, so they do actually, Connecticut, some of their first one or two roundabouts in areas where they actually did not have pedestrians, they did not add additional ped infrastructure, and they said that was one of their lessons learned right off the bat with, I think it was actually their first one, is that they're always going to put pedestrian facilities in, regardless if it is a rural environment that has no sidewalk, there is nothing to connect to, connecting to the shoulders, because we know people are using shoulders to navigate through the intersections. It really is important, and I think it's in this picture. You can see that out here on the outside there, that they that the crosswalk does come across and clearly does not. I mean, this is not a splitter island, right? This is the splitter island's over here, so this is a one-stage crossing all the way across. Okay, and pedestrians have to be outside of those outside truck aprons or blisters that we might have. So the pedestrian area is actually back here, and then as soon as they step really over that truncated dome, they're in the travel way. So that truck apron is considered part of the travel way, but really important that you do get your pedestrian facilities out of that, anything that's the outside blisters or any of the outside area that you've accommodated, like a shoulder. We want pedestrians to be able to rest and wait and make a decision outside of that. Absolutely. Thanks for the comment.
And as a follow-up, I shared two comments from Joe, who's obviously from Connecticut. He said that that was one of their first DOT designed roundabouts and that they hadn't had you yet, Hillary, come visit them to help and guide them. So Joe, I want to encourage you to contact Donna Shea, who's the Connecticut LTAP director, and get her on the ball with getting Hillary invited to your state to come and assist. So, all right, there's a question still on the Connecticut. They want to know what materials they're using for the color contrast areas.
Yeah, so I knew that question was going to come. So I need to get back to you on that. Actually, I just sat down. I was just with Scott Bushy all day yesterday, and all afternoon yesterday from Connecticut DOT. And there was several different types of material that they've been using and experimenting with actually on their projects. So I would like to please let me know who you are so I can get you. I'll probably actually just get you directly in contact with Scott Bushy. That's probably the best way, because depending on which roundabout it is, they've done things slightly different based on what they've learned.
Yep. The person who asked the question's name will be in the spreadsheet I send you.
Great. Thank you,
All
Victoria.
Right. Next question.
Right.
Any experience or discussion with the accuracy of auto turn designing RABs for a WB 67s?
Yeah, so clearly any tool that you use, no matter what kind of tool it is, you have to know the default values, you have to know the tolerance in those, so you can make sure you have the right information. So what we're designing on paper or on our computers is actually reflecting what happens out in the real world. Clearly there's a diverse abilities in drivers, but really professional drivers are truly our professional drivers. And even though there's variability in how we all drive, there's some tolerances that we need to consider. So City of Hilliard and Arcadis, I showed this actually in our June webinar. Actually, it was Brian who showed it in our, Brian and Letty who showed it in the June webinar for Ohio DOT. And Victoria, that probably was recorded, and that's probably available, that webinar from June.
It is. I'll send a link to everybody.
There is, I encourage you to watch that, because what they've done is they actually show you, they go back and forth between auto turn and the turning movements. They've got a drone footage over it, and you'll see the large difference in what was done in design and what happens in the field. Now, you can do some tweaking in any tool, any tool that you have, but you have to understand. So I know that there's many DOTs that have their own tips and tricks in terms of how they translate from an auto turn and auto tack tool to what actually happens in the field, or typical driving behavior in the field. Florida DOT has done a nice visual video of that as well. They can get a WB62FL, which is similar to a 67, doing a U-turn on a 120-foot diameter roundabout. I actually think one of the roundabouts that's on the video from Hilliard maybe is 120 as well. So I'm really going to encourage you to watch that webinar specifically. You can watch the whole thing, but watch that video that Brian and Letty show, and listen to the dialogue and watch what is going on there, because that's where we have to have a better understanding between our tools and then what actually happens out in the field. Victoria, my guess is there's more questions, but I think what I'm going to do is keep moving on the slides, and then we'll get back to more Q&A at the end. Is that all right?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so let's look forward. I've got a hot off the presses FHWA rules of the roundabout video. So this is one of the other video I want to play for you. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can manage to launch that myself here. All right, so here you go. Rules of the roundabout. All right, I hope you enjoyed the debut of the Federal Highways video there. I am going to try to get back here. There we go. And I know that there's, I know other agencies have, videos on multi-lane roundabouts, but that's just one that, again, we're really trying to do our best to from the education standpoint and do as much as we can in getting the word out on how to drive a roundabout. I know City of Hilliard has some good ones with single lane and multi-lane roundabouts, and others that are out there that are more project specific. But so go ahead and use that as you see fit as you work on projects and do some education. Now, I'm also going to play our new public service announcement. Again, if this did come out in around the June timeframe, so I did play this before. This one I'm actually playing over my audio. So it might be a little bit faint, but there wasn't a way to play an audio file through the format here today. I will let you guys know this is meant to be a radio spot. We also have a transcript on our website if that is of interest to you, but this is meant to be played, you know, over the radio or a podcast or whatever you want to call it. And so I'm going to go ahead and play that. Again, the audio is going to be over my computer.
Are you ready, kids? Go round and round, round and round. Is everyone okay?
Traditional intersections can be dangerous, but roundabouts are a safer alternative.
Really?
Roundabouts are safer for driving, walking, and bicycling. They actually improve traffic flow and reduce severe crashes by 80%.
80%?
Roundabouts save lives.
Instead of people on the street, go roundabout, roundabout, round.
All right, so again, another one that if you've got the ability to share, again, get a radio spot, that might be one that we're just thinking of all the different ways that we can get creative with our education. This also is, I just want to let you guys know, I know a lot of agencies and consultants get creative with how they do public meetings. This is something new, a floor decal that we have at Federal Highways that we use at our booth. So if we go to the National Association of County Engineers or to TRB, we've got basically are able to lay out this roundabout. Actually, that's going to be my new throw rug in my office is actually going to be this roundabout floor decal. We do have the full-size PDF and JPEG available on our website. So if you're looking for something, again, it's meant for, you can see Gene Russell and I in the bottom left in that picture. That was actually at the National Association of County Engineers. You can actually walk through it. So I can actually keep both of my feet in the lane and I can actually walk through. So this could be used for kids. It could be used for a project. I know it's a 2x2, Letty, so I apologize for that. But again, it's just trying to get people acclimated with the rules of the road related to a roundabout, and just one more way that we can help educate at again, a young age. Maybe you could take it to an open house just in general at the county fair, whatever it happens to be. I know our life is a little bit different now, much more in the virtual world, but just thinking how we can work with folks on education. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention again that next week is officially National Roundabouts Week. We were able to update our webpage to show the 3rd National Roundabouts Week. We're really encouraging all of you. This is actually the success of something like this really comes from all of you. I know many of you were active the last couple of years. I'm just going to share off to the right there. That happens to be Vail, Colorado, which is down the road from me. What a fancy cake. I don't know, that person, whoever made that cake, that's like so real life. It's amazing. But they actually last year for their National Roundabouts Week, they actually did a proclamation. So Vail got their first roundabout in 1995. They put in 2 new roundabouts a couple of years ago in cooperation with the Colorado Department of Transportation. And it's my understanding they're looking at a couple other local street locations. So it is always exciting to see what you guys have to produce for just in general what you do for roundabouts and for the safety of our traveling public. But also you're able to, this week really allows you to showcase that maybe on a larger level. So I look forward to watching social media next week and being able to share far and wide with folks in future roundabout classes that I have an opportunity to engage with states and agencies across the country. And now I want to open it up for discussion. I've got one more slide I'm going to share, but again, this would be Victoria, where we can go back to the Q&A, or if anyone has their hand raised.
No one else has been daring enough to raise their hand, but I have clarification on that turbo roundabout question.
Oh, good.
It says the turbo roundabout creates a conflict for a vehicle crossing a lane to go into the spiral lane. Isn't the same as the issues at intersections.
So, and again, I'm hopefully hearing the question the way you're intending it. I would say no. It's still a different situation than a traditional intersection. You know, there is more of the T in terms of how the approach is working, but the vehicle on the approach is still yielding to the circulatory lanes. And then the choice of lanes that of course has occurred before you get to the yield line, that still has to be made. There's typically channelization then on that approach. So you're either going to choose to get in the inside lane, probably if you're going left perhaps, or the outside lane if you're going right or through. And then the raised channelization in the turbo roundabout also really restricts your movement. You need to stay in your lane. And there's like, I want to say like 6 different turbo shapes. There's the egg and the knee and the rotor, and I'm not remembering all of them off the top of my head, but they all have different configurations based on what the movements are, the predominant movements are at the intersection. So I would still say, now I am not a turbo roundabout expert, and I'm not pretending to be. I'm a student of the turbo, probably like many of you, and they're still safe roundabouts, okay? And in fact, they've reduced property damage only crashes. If you look at the data from the Netherlands and actually Germany and Portugal and other countries, they have reduced all types of crashes, fatal and injury, as well as property damage only crashes. So they are a safe intersection. They have reduced, you still have reduced conflict points. You still have slower speeds through the roundabout. The approach definitely looks different. You still need people to observe and reduce their speeds, even though it's more of like that T intersection. But the conflict points are still significantly reduced with the turbo compared to a traditional signalized intersection or a stop controlled intersection. I hope that has helped. If it has not, please follow up with me. And actually, I encourage you to follow up with some folks actually at Arcadis and the folks that actually worked on our turbo roundabout projects, because they have actually, I would say, more of a wealth of knowledge with turbos than I do myself. Okay.
Okay, next question.
Sure.
It says, I have to ask about blind pedestrians. Montana requires PHBs and Washington requires RRFBs in all their multi-lane roundabouts. Would you agree that this should be a national requirement at urban and suburban roundabouts?
So for Federal Highway Administration, we still have really adopted the draft PROAG as a best practice. And for those of you that can think back, it's been a long time, you guys, since that draft PROAG came. Well, there's been multiple iterations, but really 2011 timeframe. If you look back on that, and it is pretty specific about multi-lane roundabouts in looking at pedestrian. It actually says signalized. You got to signalize multi-lane crossings, and then of course there's the approved equivalent. Since that was put out there in 2011, there has been the completion of the NCHRP 674. There's been completion of NCHRP 834, which again is the accessibility of pedestrians at multi-lane roundabouts and channelized turn lanes. And then also Federal Highways RFB study on accessibility with multi-lane roundabouts under our TOPR 34. All of that research came out after the draft PROAG was really out for comment. And so although there have been discussions amongst US Access Board, TRB, a roundabout committee, Federal Highways, ITE, a lot of discussions, there still is not final language. And so, you know, and Federal Highways does say that the PROAG is the best practice when it comes to accessibility. What I would say to you is, you know, we need to use our professional judgment, and we have to document if we're choosing, whether you use the examples that someone's using PHB, someone's using an RFB. Well, the pedestrian hybrid beacon actually isn't a signal either. If you actually look at the interpretation in the METCD. So it's really important that you work with your risk managers, you work with your accessibility communities, and you talk about the options that are out there. You look at that research, raised crosswalks. We know from the research that raised crosswalks were performing just as well as the pedestrian hybrid beacon when it comes to interventions and the yielding rates, as well as the time for crossing the time to wait before you're accepting a gap to cross. And so it's so important to look at that and then document it and then work with the people within your own agency to come up with a solution that is right for your community and for your agency. The U.S. Access Board informally through meetings has talked about the research and has talked about how they perceive the raised crosswalk and the PHB, pedestrian hybrid beacon, and the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. And so I would encourage you, again, it's a matter of, you know, if your state has adopted the PROAG as is, draft PROAG as is, you might have a different answer versus a state that has not adopted the draft PROAG. The most important thing is to talk, to communicate, to document with all stakeholders and make sure you make the right decision for your project, your agency, and your community. And that's what I can share with you right now. But without a final document, we're really in a challenging place because we're 10 years beyond that draft and there has not been anything formally adopted.
I want to make sure we're respectful of people's time, and I want to acknowledge that we are up to the end of the scheduled time, but I know, Hillary, you said that you don't mind staying on to answer some questions, so why don't we officially wrap up and then we can read more questions.
Okay, so I've got a few more parting thoughts for you before we end. So I just don't want you to forget that, if I can get my cursor to go, know the roundabout facts. Make sure you know the roundabout facts. Know about speed control. Know about the reduced conflict points. Know about the changes in crashes. Know everything you can about roundabouts as you are pursuing them in your practice. Be comfortable with the roundabout diameters. Know when a 150-foot diameter roundabout is actually too big and 130-foot might work just fine for your context, for your location. There's a range. We have a range for single lane from 90 to 180 and beyond. That's a big range, folks. And so depending on your context, depending on your right of way and your budget and the vehicles that you need to get through there, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of right sizing your project. Don't forget to get outside your comfort zone. Always learn something new. Challenge yourself to learn something new about roundabouts. We've heard a lot of topics here about the splitter island lengths and accessibility and crosswalks and maybe doing flush outside aprons. These are all new. And so I encourage you to get outside your comfort zone and learn a little bit more. Make sure you're familiar with the latest and greatest tools and resources. It's harder to keep up, yet it's easier to keep up because you can use search engines to help find this information. Know who your DOT roundabout specialists are. Know who in your community in Ohio you can tap to help you make sure you're working with the latest and greatest. I really believe that peer review projects often can result in a better design and a better project. I do feel that whether this is done informally or formally, there's a lot of different opportunities for peer reviews to happen at all levels and across all, whether it be consultants or local agency to DOT or even to federal highways. It's really important that we do this. Always try to learn something new with each roundabout. Take something away, and this with Victoria's challenge at the top of the webinar was to encourage you to get out there and do your own roundabout tour, and she was going to collect that information and present that. That is a wealth of knowledge, and being able to share that with someone else. Again, I learn from every roundabout that I see, and I encourage you to think about that as well. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a happy, healthy, safe weekend. It's been a pleasure. Don't forget, there's so many amazing sessions in the next couple of weeks. Make sure you register for those sessions and ask great questions of the panelists. So thank you, everyone. It's always an honor to be a part of Ohio's Roundabout Conference. You guys are the only state that does this annually. So kudos to Ohio and to Ohio LTAP and Victoria Beal for that.
Thanks, Hillary, but it's really a partnership and we're just trying to save lives. So I'm gonna move into these additional questions, and if you have to go, hopefully the technology's working and we'll have a recording of this for you later. Next question is, would you consider a flush outer truck apron or inner truck apron capable of controlling fastest path speeds? Since cars can still traverse them, it seems like they would not control speeds.
Yeah, so I wouldn't suggest, and there wasn't any examples of a flush truck apron in the center, in the circulatory roadway. The flush ones were actually on the outside. So I would, my personal practice, we want to see that reveal, that truck apron with curb and or gutter, depending on what your preference is, with the truck apron in the middle. And so, no, we don't like to see flush truck apron in the middle. We know that we achieve good speed control, even with a little bit of even 2 inches of a reveal on the truck apron. On the outside, and several of those examples that I showed you, they were really constrained from Connecticut, okay? So it's context, right? So context is really, really important. And so they were constrained with either skewed, so very acute angles between the legs, where that just having that flush, they felt that that was not actually going to affect speed control for the automobile, but it was allowing easier for the truck to move and for maintenance, winter maintenance, as well as general maintenance versus having the outside curb and the raised blister. So there's the flush part and there's blister part. So I think that's the difference there. So I was not suggesting, and actually didn't show examples of a flush apron in the center, but on the outsides where you've got some challenging spaces, that might be an option for you in the future. And again, Connecticut got to that. That's not where they started. And there's actually still refining and experimenting the types of materials they're using, again, working with their maintenance folks. So I hope that helps, is just, again, give you an idea of what one agency has seen with their projects and how they've evolved with some of their projects. Victoria?
Okay, next question. If there is a drive that is needed for a residence to get through a splitter island, is there any new guidance on the best way to do that? Material, color, drop curb?
So I have not seen any new guidance. There's a lot of examples out there that you've actually mentioned, several of the options in terms of a drop curb or actually having it flush, but just changing, actually having, I've seen it flush, and then it's having the same, like actually having concrete. So it still looks gray, like maybe the rest of the splitter island, or red, like the rest of the splitter island. So to the average person, they're probably not going to notice, but that driver would be able to pop through. So I'm not aware of any new guidance related to that, but you've captured what I'd say are the practices that I have seen on the ground and on paper.
Okay. Last question, I believe. Well, no, we had one more came in, but second to last question. Where do you see roundabout acceptance in the next 10 years? Can you opine on autonomous vehicles in roundabouts?
Okay, so depending on where you are, I know we're talking Ohio here, most of you are in Ohio, but each state is in a very different place with roundabouts. We have states like Wisconsin who have probably close to over 200 on the state system and probably close to 400 overall. That and states that have a roundabout first policy when you're touching an intersection. We've got states with the intersection control evaluation policies where you're seeing more and more roundabouts. We also have states where there's very few roundabouts on the state system, very few on the local system, and there is not there's not an acceptance, generally speaking, of roundabouts. So with our 50 states and how diverse we are across the country, we're not in the same place. And so over the next 10 years, what I like to see is progress, right? And so, and see roundabouts in all different contexts. So rural, suburban, urban, low speed, high speed, mini roundabouts, hybrid roundabouts, single lane roundabouts, turbo roundabouts are here. Is having good designs and good practice no matter where you are. But I think it's doubling down on what works. That's a phrase I've used before in other sessions, and you've probably heard National Safety Council talk about that. We know roundabouts work when they are designed well. We know, you've heard me talk about the benefits here today. And so if you've got 2, it's go for 4. If you've got 1, go for 2 or 3. find a place that they are going to work, and each agency has to make progress. I think Carmel, Indiana is still putting roundabouts in. They have over, I think, 110 or 120 in their community. So they're still going, and they already have over 100. So I think it's important where you are geographically does kind of set the tone in some cases, but that doesn't mean you as an individual agency can't make progress regardless of what everyone is doing around you. So that's the 10 years in terms of, I think it is very, very different depending on where you are. In terms of the autonomous vehicles, I did touch on that very briefly. And again, this is not, autonomous is not really in my wheelhouse at all. And so I think what's important, I know the TRB Roundabout Committee has talked about getting together with the autonomous groups and talking about roundabouts. I think it's important to pay attention in your own jurisdiction, in your own states, what's going on. If there's research within your own state on how this is working, if there's pilot projects that are going on, it's important to have those conversations about the autonomous. I know in the state of Colorado, they've done some studies, but it's been on the interstate with truck platooning, okay? And so it is important to know that get a test of, get a pulse on what's going on in your own community, in your own state, and being part of that conversation. You know, I feel that it could make, again, this is not my area of expertise, it could make roundabouts more efficient. We could have higher capacity. If you've got cars talking to each other and talking to infrastructure and in a cloud, you could potentially have, you know, there could be shorter gaps, and there could be, if there's opportunities if you look at some of that technology that's going on. I do think it's out there a little ways, and I think that it will be in certain markets sooner than others, clearly just by what is happening with the pilot programs. But I don't think that's a deterrent. I think it's an opportunity, and it might actually provide more efficiency with roundabouts. So that's my that's my opinion based on what I know of the autonomous, what's going on, which isn't much, folks.
Okay, question from one of the folks who helped to set up Ohio's section on roundabouts. It says ODOT has the design checklist for fastest path, inscribed diameter, etc. Do you know of other good resources for reviewing a roundabout?
So I know I have my checklist that I share in the classes that I teach in Ohio. I'm happy to share that with whoever. I know I actually just did 3 classes for Caltrans for 3 districts, and someone at their central office actually has their own checklist. So, and I suspect that there's, you know, I know the states that have the intersection control evaluation policy, they actually have worked in either checklists or in their spreadsheets. They have some things that oftentimes are checked or a part of the intersection control evaluation policy or directive. But I think it's more, you know, there's a handful of states for sure that have a checklist, and I'd say individuals and practitioners have their own checklist. But to my knowledge, nothing has been produced or sent out to the masses. I'd be happy to again share. I share your checklist in Ohio with the other states I've been talking to in the last 6 months. So yeah.
So if you can email me your checklist, I'll send it out to everybody.
Okay.
That'd be awesome. Sure. One last question, unless somebody, oh, I knew a minute I said that, we'd have another pop in, but same person, so I'm gonna just read both of them out. Sorry, another splitter island question. Where does the 100-foot minimum splitter island length standard in the ODOT L&D/federal guidelines come from? We are seeing many in our area with 45-foot to 65-foot long splitter islands, but generally wider in width than most to create deflection that historically have performed well. And they said they only asked because the longer splitter islands can increase cost and right-of-way impacts substantially, often to the point where the cost-benefit ratio is reduced, that the project isn't getting funded or constructed.
So most of our, and that hasn't changed much in our guidance in the US, most of that original guidance came from our international practitioners and colleagues. And so I would actually, with that question, I would actually jump back, and I have it over here on my shelf. I would jump back and look at like the UK and Australia and see, because a lot of our guidance came from those two countries, and see if they're, you know, there's a 50 minimum that's pretty clear. Now, if you get to the higher speeds in the rural environments, I think it says, I want to say it's 100 minimum, 150, could be 150, you guys, I'm not looking at it, and then 200 or more, depending on, you know, your context, your speed, and everything else. So I can't point to the original source for that. It does vary depending on approach speed. It does vary depending on context. Do you have PEDs more prevalently than maybe not, and maybe in a rural environment? You know, how wide are you trying to get that splitter island? Because that can make some effects. And even just the geometry itself, whether you've got a flare or a taper type design where it actually just, it's kind of just going like this and then you get deflection, or whether or not you've got that reverse curve type of design that you might choose to do, which is really, it is again a designer preference, and different agencies do it differently, different countries do it differently. So long story short there with that question is, I can't say 100% where that came from. My guess is it came from our international partners as a starting point, from our, and I've got our 2000 guide, if you guys remember the 2000 guide. I'd be happy to have that conversation with you offline, and I can actually pull up, some of the old research that fed into our guidance that we have here in the US, if you're looking for that, just a little bit more information to help you out with your specific you know, questions and what you're seeing there in the field.
So Hillary, thank you so much. There are no more questions in the question box, and we are so honored to have you continue to partner with us on this. Hillary won the Federal Highway Engineer of the Year Award that you can see there over her shoulder on the wall behind her recently, and we are just so thrilled that you continue to be a champion and an advocate for roundabouts, not only in Ohio, but across the country. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Victoria. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. It's an honor to get asked back each year. Thank you guys so much. Let me know if you've got any questions. Thanks to the Ohio Division Office, to the Ohio LTAP. Again, have a safe, happy, healthy weekend. Take care.
Wonderful. Take care, everyone. We'll see you on the next roundabout session. Bye-bye.